There's been plenty of focus on the Dolphins and the offensive side of the ball through the first 3 weeks of the season. But what about over on defense? What are some adjustments, personnel changes that could maybe help the Dolphins defense kick it into even another gear? We're looking at that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. You can find all of our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you list your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Plenty of focus, and rightfully so, has been spent on this program and many other programs on the Dolphins offense. They're averaging 11 points a game. It's not great. Not going to win a lot of football games doing that. Needless to say. And there's schematic challenges. There's running game challenges. There's quarterback injury challenges. There's implementation of the talent that you do have at your disposal challenges. We've looked at it all this week. But what about over on defense? I think, the Miami Dolphins defense, it's been a frustrating start from the lens of explosive plays. They've given up a lot of explosive runs. Explosive runs are qualified as runs of 10 or more yards. And explosive plays are plays of 20 or more yards passing the football. And those plays reared their head for the Dolphins against Seattle with an explosive run to end a touchdown drive that put the game completely on ice. Not that the game wasn't already iced before that in the first place. A 71-yard touchdown pass to DK Metcalf against some quarters cover two variation, whatever the exact coverage was. I know we're in two high safeties, and DK Metcalf runs his vertical stem and leans like he's going to run the over, and Jevon Holland drives on it. And DK Metcalf converts and goes vertically up over the top of him for a big explosive play. Instances like that, 3rd and 16 against the Bills and a scramble and get outside the pocket for a 33-yard gain where you're in a scramble drill and Ramsey's in the flat and the running back kind of runs a rail and works up past him and then kind of drifts and the safety loses it because he's looking at the crosser coming across the middle, so he vacates a deep half. Or Jordan Poyer driving on a hook route in the goal line against Jacksonville. And they get the ball up over the top of Jalen Ramsey's in the flat and tries to sink underneath of it, but it's not really his cat. A lot of frustrating, not on the same page, not disciplined to play your role first type of plays. Feel like they have been the catalyst of a lot of the explosive plays. But we did the running game right against Jacksonville where you're backed up inside your own 5-yard line and both linebackers jump in the same A-gap. And it's 20-plus yard run. Eliminating those kinds of plays is essential for the Dolphins to have a puncher's chance in these football games with how the offense is playing right now. So what are some things that you can do to maybe help that process along? I have a couple ideas. A couple observations from the film from week 3 against Seattle. We're going to get into them here. I think the first thing for me is I would love to see more of Jevon Holland playing low. And his nickel usage has gone up in each of the first 3 games. Played 18 snaps, I believe, in the nickel against Seattle in week 3. Jevon's a very instinctual player. He's also a very physical player. Now, he's fast and he has the range to play on the back end. But for all of the insight and questions of where are the dynamic plays for Jevon Holland, I do think him playing on the roof where he can cover a lot of ground. It's helpful to do that, but it doesn't put a player like him in positions to be more around the football. And you have this challenge where you have Jalen Ramsey that is kind of the same way, but he plays outside corner instead of safety. Ramsey's presence is tangible. He makes a number of impact plays on the perimeter, whether that's in the run game, whether that's in quick game on the outside. Teams aren't really tempted to target and test him a whole lot. And again, people are going to look at the and credit to Brian Thomas. He won a route over the top of him, and Ramsey makes early contact, trying to disrupt a deep target on a ball that was underthrown, and draws a big pass interference that sets Jacksonville up in scoring territory. Like, you credit guys when they get wins. But by and large, Ramsey, there's not a lot of appetite to throw to him, and he's in positions to make plays for others that gives the perception to fans that he's getting beat on these plays. So I understand you have to balance Jalen Ramsey, but Ramsey really hasn't moved to the degree that I thought that he would. This is the second consecutive year you kind of come into a season and your expectation is Ramsey's going to be all over the place. He's going to live in the nickel. He's not doing that. They're not playing him outside. I mean, their primary nickel still is Kader Kohu, but then Kendall Fuller goes down against Seattle with it going into concussion protocol, and they bring Storm Duck in, and then Storm Duck has a shoulder thing, and he gets banged up. And Kader goes outside as the other outside corner, and Jevon comes down, and then they're playing Marcus May, and you get into that big nickel look that I've been asking for 3 weeks. And I thought that was the best consistent stretch of Jevon Holland's season, was playing in the nickel. And he's played this going back to Oregon. His final season at Oregon was predominantly being in a star position or close to the line of scrimmage. And I think that's a really interesting potential pivot, because as I've graded the Dolphins defense, and I have my grades up for the season I'm looking at right now, the player who I have as the lowest graded player on the Dolphins defense is Kader Kohu in the nickel. And the nickel is a tough spot to live. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of grass to cover. It's a lot of snap decisions to make. It's a lot of processing in a short amount of time. And if you're not going to use Ramsey in that role, except for selectively based on matchups, and you want to use him as a primary matchup player, that's totally fine. But I think you can live in a world where Marcus May and Jordan Poyer can be the two predominant safeties, and Jevon Holland can play down in the nickel. I think that is a potential ticket to the Dolphins getting some more, not just impact plays out of Jevon Holland, but I think his decision-making and instincts there would be a big boost to the Dolphins as a whole. Now, do they actually do that? Remains to be seen. Kind of seems like they have their preferred spots for guys, and I get you do want to have Jevon Holland living in a world where he can play on the roof. Now, they've inverted some coverages through the first 3 weeks and had Kader Kohu rotate out of being either an outside corner or a nickel player and actually play a deep half responsibility. I'm not saying that he's going to play safety for you. And I thought Kader played probably his best game of the season. Is that? Let me pull up my weekly results tab. Yeah, Kader probably played his best game of the season in week 3 against Seattle. But at the same time, I thought Jevon Holland made up for the, I guess, deep option route. It's a big hit on your score if you are the primary coverage player on a 70-plus yard touchdown. Jevon Holland still scored as a overall for the 60 snaps that I scored him on, a net 2 expectation player based on his role. But you look at the snaps exclusively in the nickel, I thought it was the best stretch we've seen from him. So that's one thing for me I would like to see more of for the Dolphins in the coming weeks. We have more thoughts coming your way, looking at the linebackers. That's next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold gives the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. A new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. If you are looking for an exciting weekend, and you got to wait until the Dolphins play on Monday night. You want an exciting weekend of football. Get in on the action with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike in other apps on Prize Picks, it is you against the numbers, you against the house, not you against 5 million active users. Throughout the month of September, Caleb Williams can get you a win with 1 passing yard. Let the #1 overall pick do some heavy lifting for you on your combinations throughout the month of September. So this is the last weekend that you can get in on this special perk on Prize Picks. You can pick 2 to 6 player stat projections and win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get it $50 instantly when you play $5. That is code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. We got to see for the first time this season a little bit of Anthony Walker. And David Long was a really unfortunate situation. He's, Mike McDaniel kind of discussed earlier this week, dealing with a hamstring issue. Not quite sure what his status for the game is going to be. And hamstrings have kind of been a thing for David Long. So I think this is an area for the Dolphins that you might need to be a little careful, right? You don't want this to be a thing that lingers for David Long. But it was unfortunate because you could see it was about 4 minutes left in the third quarter. You finish a rep and he's coming from space and attacking downhill and it's a run. So then he's got to stop and turn and pivot and get upfield. And you kind of see him pull up. And at the end of the play, he kind of reaches back and grabs for his hamstring. But Seattle goes no huddle. And they get him on the field for 8 plays. So he's out there and you can tell it's bothering him. And after every snap, he's reaching back for his right hamstring for 8 plays of no huddle on defense. And then that drive ends with the Calais Campbell tip. Calais got a lot of gas for his performance on the Substack on Touchdown Miami. So I did the game grades and I did an all 22 look at Calais Campbell and just in 26 snaps, how he was awesome. You could sign this dude to a contract extension today and I would be thrilled about it. He's 38 years old. Things have not worked for Miami in a lot of ways. The Calais Campbell investment is not one of the things that has not worked. He's been tremendous and doing so on a pitch count with 26 snaps. But we'll get more into the defensive line here in a minute. But after David Long comes off the field off that drive, it becomes the Anthony Walker show as the other linebacker with Jordan Brooks. And I thought that Walker did a really nice job stepping in, and he is kind of a well-documented player in coverage. And as I look at the strengths of how the guys are scoring for me on a play-by-play basis on defense, if you told me you got into some 3rd and long situations and you rotated David Long and Anthony Walker, I don't think I would be mad at it. I think David's been very good in the run game. He was good in the run game last year for Miami. But the pass game stuff, it was kind of his reputation coming to Miami from Tennessee was that it was an area that he really hung his hat. And it's just not quite clicked all the way. I still think he has plenty of ability to play in space. But I think Brooks has been a better coverage player And I think Anthony Walker, with what his resume is, if you're asking for, he played 16 snaps, and he might have to play more than that if David Long's not able to go. But if you can then kind of get him back onto a specialty kind of package as a player who's dealt with some injury stuff, ideally you can find a right role that's not too high volume of a snap count for him. And then we're probably going to get out of this season, and we're going to have a conversation about snap count type players and guys with injury histories and all that stuff. It's really felt like it's kind of bubbled to the surface with how the Dolphins took on their early season prep and whether or not this team was completely ready to play. It's a conversation for another day. But you do acknowledge that element exists, and there were fans that had those questions. And, at the time you say, I can only answer that with the best of my ability. Here's their thought process. We're going to see if it works. Not a great sign through the first 3 weeks. But I definitely think Anthony Walker potentially getting more rotational, obvious passing down situation reps is an area that I'd be really intrigued. And this player for the last couple of seasons in different schemes for Miami has been Duke Riley. And having a bridge between Duke Riley being the next man up and allowing Duke Riley to stay as the special teams player that he is. A really disappointing penalty for Duke Riley, by the way, on that punt against Seattle. I mean, this is a 37-yard penalty. It's going to go down in the books as a 15-yard penalty and a re-kick on the punt, but you had him backed up inside the 10-yard line. And then they took over at the 42, 41 after the re-kick on a totally needless behind the play side swipe cheap shot. It's I'll save the rest of my thoughts there on that incident for Duke. But having a bridge player in Anthony Walker and maybe having him need to give you a couple weeks, I think the good news for Miami with that specific injury situation with David Long is you have 2 more games before the bye. You had a little extra rest. So with the Monday game, obviously, to kind of get a temperature check on how bad it is or is not for David Long and his hamstring. But, Tennessee, you go New England, and then we get a chance to catch our breath. So if indeed David Long's hamstring requires a couple of weeks, you might only miss 2 games out of it. And to have Anthony Walker and ask Anthony Walker, hey, give us 2 games. But then once that's done and David's back, let's get you back into the swing of things as a rotational player. I think that could kind of help some of your underneath coverage, compressing throwing windows type opportunities on obvious passing down. So that's another thing that I'm looking for as well, to see if they choose to embrace. Now, let's talk about the defensive line. I have some thoughts. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Right now, Miami's favored by a point, as of the last time I checked over on FanDuel. And 1.5. We'll see if we get an announcement on a quarterback. Does that move the line? I think based on what you're expecting to happen, the beat reporters kind of teasing that it might be Snoop Huntley. I'd be interested to see if that's formally announced, if that does move the line. Maybe you want to get in on a better line now than what it might be if that is indeed down. So don't waste any time. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. That is FanDuel.com. Up front for Miami, the Quentin Bell reps probably don't need to see anymore. I think it's been a little disappointing for a player who splashed so much in early camp and then gets in the preseason games and it doesn't click. And he's got about 45 snaps on the season thus far. You haven't really gotten anything at tangible value there. Can we get Mohamed Kamara in the rotation? And I know you don't want to have too much youth and inexperience on the edge, and I get that, but is Quentin Bell really all that much youth and inexperience? I think when the time comes for the Dolphins to open up a roster spot, whether it's for Tagovailoa or whether it's for Odell Beckham or whether it's for Bradley Chubb, I think Bradley Chubb's the low-hanging fruit here because he plays the same position. Quentin Bell's probably the first guy on the block for me. And I would love to see Mohamed Kamara get some opportunities to kind of get into the rotation a little bit. But also the depth. I think Brandon Pili's shown a little bit more than Benito Jones. And Benito's not quite anchoring the way that you maybe hoped that he would. I still think he's a quality depth, rotational nose tackle type player. And he's played 50 snaps on the season, but they're getting him out there in reps that don't involve a nose tackle. And for what Brandon Pili's shown in a fractional amount of the same opportunities, I kind of roll the dice with Brandon in those situations. So I would like to see if you're going to go with your even fronts where you got two interior defensive linemen and you don't have a nose tackle. And a lot of the times to start the game, it's Campbell and Sealer. And then they rotate where it's Sealer and Hand. And then it's Campbell and Jones. And then you get into key situations and third downs, and it's Sealer and Campbell again, right? Can we get Pili a little bit more run if we're going to go even front stuff and it's Campbell and Pili? I'd be more interested in seeing what that looks like because I actually think Brandon Pili is playing off of the blocks a little bit better too. And I'll give some credit to Deshaun Hand, who I thought had a nice game against Seattle. And the guard play there, it was one of the things when I did the Calais Campbell film studies. The guard play in Seattle is not good. Okay, but that doesn't take away from, in this game, the execution that these guys had. Hand had the sack. He had a couple of other nice plays. I thought he showcased a good retraceability and pursuit. So I'm generally fine with the depth, but I'd like to see Pili in the fourth spot, I think is an area for me, not on the edge. And then lastly, I don't really see a lot of value, and sometimes it's easier said than done, and you can't just run a guy on and run a guy off and substitute based on what the offense is doing from a personnel standpoint. I don't see a lot of value in Emmanuel Ogbah third down pass rush reps. His wins as pressures, and this includes the first interception where you get him in the grasp, you get Geno Smith in the grasp. They're coming on twists inside and looping it. And obviously the sack of Trevor Lawrence at the end of the game in week 1, twist looping back inside. Winning off the edge, you're not really getting a lot of value there. So if you're going to ask a guy to win on twists and you're going to ask a guy to try to pressure, Chop's right here, right? And Chop on the season has played about 65 snaps on the season. You contrast that to Phillips has played 104. You have Ogbah's played 106. You have Quentin Bell's played 44. So I would like to see Chop starting to eat more into the Ogbah reps. It's especially on third down. Sometimes easier said than done. But that's kind of where I'm at for the Dolphins and their defense and things that I would like to see in the weeks ahead. If you're watching on YouTube, I've been holding that cough back for 2 minutes and it caught up to me here at the very end. But you can make sure you find all of our shows here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We have the game on Monday. So we will have one more game preview coming your way. You can look for that on Monday as well. I'm Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. I got to go get this cough out. I hope you guys enjoy the weekend that is ahead. I'll talk to you all on Monday. Go Fins.